Hey y'all, I have some easy and delicious ground beef recipes for you. I love having ground beef in my freezer because it makes just some quick and easy meals. Some of these are new to us that we've never had before, and some of them are old favorites. My daughter requests that taco casserole every year on her birthday. It's that good. So I'm going to share with you these delicious recipes. They're all 10 out of 10, and I will have them all either linked down below in the description box or typed out so you can make these. I went ahead and started on 1 pound of ground beef, just making the meatballs for the meatball sub. And I had a cute little helper here helping me, and he was counting the meatballs for me. And I'm just browning those in a cast iron skillet with some avocado oil. I don't want to cook them all the way. They will cook the rest of the way in the meatball sub casserole. This was so good and so easy to make. And I've got some bread here. Instead of buying the garlic bread, I just got this out of the freezer. It's just pre-sliced Italian bread from Walmart. And I'm going to lay out my bread here, and I'm going to melt some butter and some garlic, and I'll just rub it on the bread and let it toast in the oven while I'm getting everything else ready. And I've seen a lot of recipes where they've torn up the bread, or some people have used pasta, but I saw someone say that you want to toast the bread so it won't be soggy, so that's what I'm going to do. I'll just rub all the pieces with the garlic butter mixture and then let it toast in the oven until everything else is ready. Okay, I've got my meatballs that I made the other day, and I'm going to cover them up with some sauce and mix that together. I am using my Rayo sauce. I got a great deal on this sauce at a salvage store. It was only $2.99. I know I've seen it for $6 and $7. I don't know if I could really spend that much money on some pasta sauce. But I'm just going to pour that over the meatballs and let that simmer. In the sauce, I'm going to mix up like a creamy mixture that's going to go in the middle. And it's just cream cheese, mayonnaise, and I added some pepper and some Italian seasonings. And I'm just going to mix that up until it's smooth. And it didn't call for it, but I am adding some of that Parmesan cheese that was so good that I use in everything now. So I'm just going to add that to it as well. So I just spread that over the bread, and I also added a half a cup of shredded mozzarella cheese. Okay, now I'm going to just layer the meatballs over the cheese mixture. And if I had to do this over again, I would make the meatballs just a little bit smaller. It was a little bit hard to eat with the bigger meatballs, but just make them a little bit smaller and it will be perfect. Okay, I added all the meatballs, and now I'm just going to pour the sauce all over the top and make sure I get all the cheese covered in all that delicious sauce. Okay, then I added some shredded mozzarella cheese and some of that Parmesan cheese over the top, and it says to bake it uncovered for 30 to 35 minutes. And that was so good, y'all. Look at it. It was smelling so good, and it tasted amazing. We just had this with the rest of that salad that we had from the other day, and this was the perfect weeknight meal, y'all. I cannot believe I have not ever made this before, but it won't be my last time for sure. This is a one-pot cheesy taco skillet. It was so good, and it came together quick and easy. And in this recipe, I got to use up a lot of stuff that I had in my fridge, especially like some vegetables. And I know if you have picky kids, they would probably never know that you had vegetables in here. It does call for a zucchini, which I've never had in Mexican before, and also some spinach, but that'll come later. And I've got a pepper and an onion. I had a pepper that was going bad, and I also had some onion in the fridge that I needed to use up, so it works out really good. And I'm just going to stir that around until it's cooked. It does say to brown the ground beef and drain it and then cook the other things, but I thought I would just do it all at once, and then I'll drain out the grease after everything is cooked. Now I'm going to go ahead and add the spinach in. It calls for a lot more than I put in there, but that's all I had, so I just rinsed it off and added to that. But I would next time chop it up, especially if you have kids and they can see all that green stuff in there. You want to chop it up. I could still see it in there, and I like spinach, but if you're trying to hide it from kids, you probably need to chop it up. but I'm just going to stir this around until the spinach gets wilted. Okay, I just took it out of the pan and put it in a colander over a bowl to let that drain. And while it's doing its thing, I'm going to add a can of Rotel. This was the original. It was a little bit spicy, but it wasn't too bad. So now I'm going to add that mixture back into the Rotel and get that all mixed in together. And then I added a packet of taco seasoning and just mixed that together. And I turned up the heat and let that cook a little bit, and then I turned it on simmer, and I'm just going to let it hang out until I get to the next step. Okay, it's done. It's absorbed all those flavors. I've got some Mexican rice over there on the stove. So now I'm going to go ahead and top it with some cheese. I've got some Monterey Jack that I'm going to add to the top. And you could use this in a taco salad. You could put this in a taco in a hard shell or a soft shell. But this was really good. You could do all kinds of stuff with it. I would have made a taco salad with it, but I didn't have any lettuce. And you could also make nachos with it. If you had some tortillas, it would be good with that as well. Does that not look so good? You could probably also add beans to it. This is so versatile. You could do a lot with this, but it was really good. And especially if you don't have but a few minutes to make dinner, this would be perfect. And I got this rice. This is my favorite rice. It's the Goya brand. And I'm also going to serve it with some sour cream. And I've got an avocado that I chopped up that really needs to be used up. So I'm going to use that too. Y'all, these were so good. I'm so glad I expanded my horizons and made some different recipes that I've never made before. So I know y'all are going to enjoy them. If you've got ground beef, y'all have got to make these recipes. And I've got some ground beef here that I can with some tomato sauce. If you don't have that on hand, just brown a pound of ground beef and add in a can of tomato sauce. You could also add in some salsa, or you could add in some Rotel. And I'm adding in some of my home canned chicken broth. I'm going to add in a can of corn with the juice. Didn't mean to do that. I like that little bit of sweetness in the juice. And I'm adding in some navy beans. You can add in any kind you'd like, some black beans or pintos, and I don't drain those either. It kind of thickens it up a little bit. And I'll stir that around, and then I'll start adding in my spices. I'm adding in 2 generous tablespoons of chili powder, and I also added in a tablespoon of paprika, added in a half a tablespoon of cumin, a tablespoon of onion powder, and then with the garlic powder I just measured with my heart. And then I'm just going to stir that around, and that was pretty much it. Just get it heated up. I boil it and simmer it for a few minutes. This was so good. I put it over some potatoes that I put in the Instant Pot, y'all. If y'all have never put those yellow potatoes in there, you are missing out. It's just something about them that makes their texture just so good. And I'm topping it with the last bit that I can scrape out of my sour cream, and I'm adding in some cheese, and that was dinner, y'all. This was amazing, and it took maybe 15 minutes to put together, so you got to make that. And next I'm going to make some homemade sloppy joes. I don't know where this has been all my life, but I don't know why I've never done this before, but it was so easy. I will have that recipe link below. You got to make it. And I'm just using up some of the peppers and the onions that I had in my pantry. Those peppers came from my garden that I've had cut up in there that I needed to use up. So I'm just going to cook this until the vegetables are soft, and then I added the ground beef back in, and I doubled this recipe. And I'm adding in some tomato paste, and I'll just mix that up in the pan. I think I should have used a bigger pan. And now I'm going to add in some ketchup. This was just way better than anything you could get in a can, like Manwich. And I'm also adding in some brown sugar, and that was it, y'all. Look at this. This made the house smell amazing. This was so good, I'll never go back to Manwich. I must have been really excited because this is the only footage I got of me plating it, but this was so good. You've got to make it. And y'all got to make this too, and it cannot be any easier. All you're doing is browning some ground beef, and I added in some taco seasoning and some of my corn salsa that I canned, and just made that with I think I added a little bit of water to it, but not much because you don't want it to be soupy. And I did brown my crescent roll a little bit. Just take it out and put it in the greased pan and bake it for just a few minutes so it doesn't get soggy. And just put that ground beef mixture on the top. And then just top it with some cheese. You could use any kind of cheese, cheddar, you could use pepper jack. I am using some Monterey Jack. And just pop that in the oven until the top is nice and bubbly and the crescent roll is brown. But oh my goodness, y'all, this was so delicious. You cannot believe how easy this was. And I'm just cutting up some onions and some tomatoes and lettuce, and we're going to top it with some sour cream, and you could even top it with some salsa. But I'm not going to put it on there. I don't want to get it soggy, so I'm going to cut it into squares, and then we'll load up each one with our toppings. Oh my goodness, y'all. Okay, I'm going to start on the Philly cheesesteak pasta, and I've got my ground beef from yesterday, and I've got 1 onion chopped, and I added a chopped up bell pepper, and I'm adding a mushroom, or a couple mushrooms, even though the recipe doesn't call for it. I've got those in my fridge and I need to use that up, so I'm going to go ahead and add that, and I'm going to stir that around and cook it until the red pepper is softened. And also I added some salt and pepper, and I'm adding some Worcestershire sauce to it. I didn't measure, I just eyeballed it, but I will have the exact recipe link down below. And here I'm adding the noodles. The recipe calls for macaroni, but I'm adding some small shells that I had on hand that I needed to use up, and I'm just going to mix that around together. Okay, it calls for 2 cups of beef broth. I'm just using my home canned beef broth. It does call for 1 cup of water, and I had a lot of liquid in mine, so I would probably leave that off if I were you. But I'm just going to heat it up to boiling, and then I'm going to cover it with a lid, and I'm going to let it simmer for about 15 minutes or until the pasta is cooked. So now the pasta is done. I'm going to go ahead and take some cream cheese and put it in there and let it melt. The recipe calls for provolone and mozzarella, but I didn't have any, so I had some white sliced cheese, so I just used that, and it turned out perfect. And it did say that you could add milk, but I didn't think it needed it. And it also called for provolone and mozzarella over the top, so I had some Colby Jack cheese, so I just used that instead. I still can't believe I've never made a Philly cheesesteak pasta before, because I love a good cheesesteak sandwich, and this was really delicious. It came together in no time, and there was not a leftover in sight. We ate it all, and we loved it. And I just paired it with a salad, and it was so good. This is a cheeseburger soup you have got to try. It says it's award-winning, and I believe it. I made this for my niece and nephew's soup party, and I came in third, so not too shabby. And I really love this soup. It is going to be on my top rotation for sure. And just brown your ground beef and add in the carrots. I will have all the recipes linked down below in the description box. And I'm adding in some parsley and some more of that chicken broth. I think that was maybe my last jar. And I did put these potatoes in the Instant Pot and cooked them just because, like I said, you just will not believe how good they are. And I'll just chop those up and put it in the soup. It's not quite what the recipe says, but this is the way I like to do it. And I'll just add the potatoes in there. I might have added just a few more than what the recipe said, but then I'm going to make the whole recipe, and then I'll let those potatoes sit and soak up all that delicious broth. Now I'm going to add in some Velveeta. It was about 1/3 of the package. So I'm just going to cut that up just a little bit so it would melt a lot faster. And I'll just stir that in there until it melts. And then I'll go ahead and add the milk. The recipe says milk, but I did add in just a little bit of the heavy cream that I had in the refrigerator. I wanted to use that up. One of the things I'm trying to do is use up everything in my refrigerator so nothing goes to waste. So I used the rest of that, and it made it just so creamy. But this soup was amazing. It was so easy to put together. I think shredding up the carrots was probably the hardest thing that was in this soup, but it was delicious, and I highly recommend y'all make this, especially like tonight. think I'm going to make it because it's raining outside and it's just so cold, and this soup was just delicious. So I highly recommend this one too. So I hope y'all make all these recipes. They were all a 10 out of 10 delicious. So I hope y'all have a wonderful week, and I'll see y'all in the next video.